Looking at the photograph brings back memories of my first trip abroad from Britain, and for many of us in the group, it was our first travel overseas. 1958, of our generation at that time, it was the first trip to a village in Switzerland called Oberhofen on Lake Thun in the Bernese Oberland. Brady had been abroad before, I believe, at Montana of a previous generation, but this was the first trip in 1958, and it was going to be 10 days in a youth hostel in Oberhofen, organised and led, of course, by Yogi. The trip cost £21, and it took a year to save and pay in our subs to be able to go on holiday. It was miraculous. The feeling of leaving England, going to what was a special country. Not many people went on holiday to Switzerland. And the journey itself was an adventure, travelling down to Dover, the ferry across the channel to Calais, with all our luggage, which was mostly suitcases, no smart rucksacks, piled on board the deck. And then from Calais, a train changing at Paris, and then down to Basel in Switzerland, third class travel. Because it was the time of the teenager coming to the fore, couples paired off and Yogi patrolled the corridor train to make sure they weren't up to any naughties, which I'm sure they were. In Basel, I remember changing trains at Basel, we found the station buffet and we all bought chips, French fries, served in silver tureens. It was our first taste of food abroad, and it tasted like heaven. From Basel, we took a journey to Thun, and then along the coastal road of Lake Thun to the youth hostel in Oberhofendorf. We were in dormitories, of course. The actual scenery, we felt we were in a Disney movie. Perfectly formed mountains, which were snow-capped, rolling hills, even the cows had cowbells on. It was spectacular. There were organised events by Yogi. There was football played against a local semi-professional team in Thun, which was very important because the stadium was used in the 1956 Olympics in Thun, and Brady boys ran out onto the pitch, which was used in the Olympics, to be defeated heavily by Thun. The photograph is taken in a tiny valley up the mountains between the Jungfrau and the Eiger, famous iconic mountains. And this was a little staging post called Kleine Scheidegge. And there was a restaurant there and a few shops. And this was taken outside a cafe. And I'm there near the front with sunglasses. The guy right in the front with a camera around his neck was Jeff Bentley. On his right and our left is Brian Goodman. And of course, Carol Mayer, who was about 10 years old, I would imagine, was always there. At the back, holding a glass up, is Morris Mitzmaker, known as Mitzi. Behind myself is a lad whose first name was Keith, I can't remember his surname, but it was a sense of being fairly sophisticated at that time, sitting here, glasses in hand, no money in our pockets, and being schlepped up this mountain by Yogi. In fact, most of the journey to this was by a spectacular train that the Swiss had cut through the mountains to this pass. There was snow around us, there were husky dogs in cages, and it really was something we'd never experienced before in our lives. Following our trip up to the Eiger and coming back down to floor level, we went down to Interlaken and then back along the lake to Oberhofen. Opposite the youth hostel was a little bar called the Milk Bar, with a beautiful looking girl behind the counter. And we used to pop over there for snacks. Food was cooked by the managers in the hostel. They brought all the food with them, including kosher meat from Norman Goldberg's butchery. One of the most interesting days was a 3-day hike. Yogi divided the boys into pairs and said, go off and go as far as you can and come back within 3 days. I cannot imagine 16-year-olds being asked to do that today. I got as far as the Simplon Pass. Who was I with there? Harvey Martin. We hitchhiked to the Simplon Pass. We wanted to get into Italy, but we had very little time left, so we hitchhiked all the way back again. But again, being on one's own, I was able to practice my schoolboy German. We didn't want to go home. There was no feeling of homesickness. We were going back to the drab East End of London from this beautiful part of the world, let alone Europe, the Bernese Oberland. I was encouraged to go the following year, in 1959. We went back to the same place. And these holidays abroad opened everybody's eyes. Particularly, I was very interested in geography and history and the language. So I made good use of it, along with some very good friends. We were in a dormitory, and there were a few characters amongst us who got up to funny things. But there was also the time of the film called The Vikings with Kirk Douglas. And so everybody sat around shouting, the Vikings, and praying to Odin. Silly little thing to remember. But it brought people together. The youth hostel was on the shores of Lake Thun, so they were swimming in the lake as well, boating on the lake, and a good time was had by all, the memory of which lasts until this day.